Well, hey there, folks. Welcome back to the Out of Spec podcast. I am your host, Jordan, joined by Colton, aka Out of Spec Detail. How are you doing, Colton?
Doing great today.
Awesome. Yeah, so we are talking detailing. Well, with you on, that basically usually means there's something involved with making a car look good or keeping a car looking good. And I think that's an important aspect of a car ownership. I mean, a lot of people grew up with ICE cars, internal combustion engines, kind of learned how to take care of the maintenance. But the other big component is how the car looks. Now, if you're buying a 25-year-old used car, maybe you don't care about the paint as much, but for those of you buying new cars, which is a lot of people, especially in the EV world right now, you buy it, you see that beautiful factory paint, or in some cases, not beautiful, you want to fix it. But we've already talked about paint in a previous episode. Go check that out if you're curious about paint, because that was a fascinating conversation I had with Colton a few weeks ago. But today we're talking about ceramic coating. That is something, it's a buzzword almost people talk about in the industry. It's the way to kind of protect your car in various circumstances from various things. But I wanted to dive deeper beyond the word. What does it mean? What are the varieties of ceramic coating? What is that versus wax? Because that's something, at least I grew up kind of waxing cars, or at least being experienced to that. What is it, and what can you tell us about its importance and where it lies in your job?
Yeah, definitely. So that's kind of what I built my business around is really doing a lot of paint corrections and ceramic coatings. So getting scratches, swirl marks out, and then protecting the car. Now, just in general, for coating durability, there is just this massive wide variety of durability. So it can go from as far as ceramic coatings, as you talk, from maybe 1 year to 10 years. And some companies promote lifetime. I want to kind of dive deep into that a little bit later, but just in general. So if I get a client that goes, okay, I'm interested in ceramic coating, I don't really understand it. What are my benefits? What am I, what does it do? What doesn't it do? First off, I'm going to say ceramic coatings are not snake oil. They are not like bulletproof things that you put on your car. You never have to wash it again. They just like repel all dirt. It's not the case at all. There's a lot of maintenance that goes on with them. The biggest thing that I really think ceramic coatings are made for is maintaining a vehicle. So going back to a traditional wax, so those will typically last around 1 to 2 months of, kind of durability for a wax. Now you also have kind of this mid-range between wax and full-on ceramic coating, which is like a more sealant. Those can be a 6 to 12 month deal. Now we're starting to infuse ceramic coatings into sealants and in waxes. But I think they are definitely in these different categories and definitely have their difference in durability. The big thing that we're talking about when you get a car ceramic coated in general, I go through this principle talking about the less you touch your car, the better. Now, there's some caveats with that because you need to wash these things, make sure that you're getting the dirt and grime off. But say if you're waxing every 1 to 2 months and you're going around doing this on every little panel and putting, lots of stuff on there, you're always risking the chance of putting scratches, swirl marks, love marks, as we call them, as you're kind of touching the paint. So having something that's more durable that you don't have to do that, you can have a lot of lubrication when you're washing. So water and soap is your essentially lubrication, minimizing that risk. That's why I really, really like ceramic coatings, especially in environments like Colorado here. We have a lot of nasty, nasty wintertime, just crud on the road everywhere. And it's really important to kind of help remove that. Now, over the winter time, you will get this kind of buildup. You'll see a lot of the times, the big thing with ceramic coatings is they beat up. And then you'll see this kind of wake, I call it, behind the front wheel, kind of down the doors and on the back end to where it's going to sheet water. Typically, what's happening there is the coating is actually getting kind of contamination built up in there. So you have to go back in, hand wash it, and release all the contamination because it's just clogging the pores in the ceramic coating, not allowing it to actually bead.
That's really interesting. Yeah, and we'll have a whole other episode for those of you tuning in. Like and subscribe, by the way, because we're going to talk about winterizing your vehicle and such, which is definitely important in Colorado. We'll get to that in another episode. But I did want to ask, what, as far as the compounds of ceramic coating, how they're made, I guess, or what's inside them. Why is there such a disparity? How is there 1 year and a 10 year, and of course all different segments in between that? What is the difference, and what do you typically use the most?
Yeah, so there is just a massive difference. And I think this is one of the pros and cons to the kind of ceramic coating industry is because when somebody comes to me and the new buzzword is graphene ceramic coatings, I think a full like deep dive into talking graphene coatings is probably needed. But the term ceramic is really interesting because the chemical compositions in these are completely different. So your typical SiO2 that is found in kind of your base ceramic coating reacts very differently than to what I use. So I'm actually switching coatings. We should probably talk about that as well in another kind of whole video and subsection. But they use polyxylazate. I don't even think I'm saying that right. It's this like crazy long name, and it's how the actual coating is chemically made. But there's a huge durability difference, and it's really interesting. I think a lot of the times in the industry, what really concerns me is that they're not physically testing these on cars most of the time. They're doing kind of lab tests and controlled environments. To put this, okay, we've got a 5-year coating, an 8-year coating, a 10-year coating. And real world is very tricky because it's how do you wash your car? Are you taking it to a car wash that uses non pH balanced soap and it's kind of stripping the coating off? Do you never wash your car? Do you always wash it? So there's so many different factors that play into that it's kind of overwhelming to understand from a consumer and even as a detailing kind of nerd on what's actually good, what's not, because there's a lot of marketing hype around the buzzword as we talked about ceramic coatings in general.
Yeah, wow, that makes sense. I mean, how do you determine which products to use? Because there's probably a lot on the actual product field as far as the playing field of everything. How have you kind of selected the ones that you tend to lean towards, and why do you like them so much?
Yeah, so when I originally started, was kind of using a few different companies. So I originally started with CarPro, using kind of their consumer grade ones, which was C Quartz UK. So it was made for kind of those wetter, colder environments, which we have here in Colorado. Um, but I've kind of developed and understood different coatings. Now, one big thing that I look for in ceramic coatings is how they go on, because there's nothing worse than spending 20, 30 hours like polishing, perfecting the paint, and then you put a coating on and it goes on horribly. You've got high spots everywhere, streaking everywhere. So really finding that balance is very, very tricky. What I've recently been running into, and I don't necessarily want to blow up G-Technic on this, but I have been using the G-Technic Crystal Serum Light and XOV4 combo. Now, these are not their accredited program. I think we should touch on that in this video as well, talking about accredited versus consumer grade. But what I was having a lot of issues with was actually paint swelling, as we call it. So it's the carrier of how the actual coating gets dissolved into the paint to physically bond to it. It would cause the paint to actually swell and give these really crazy marks. Kyle's plaid back here, I was having a lot of issues with that. You get these big, like dark streaking marks on it, and it's typically on softer paint. A lot of times we see them in GM paints and issues like that. But it's such an interesting topic to think about. Like the crystal serum light that I was using was, you would put it on there and wait for it to flash. You could leave it on for 2 to 3 minutes. This new stuff I'm using, which is actually Gion Mo's Evo, so it's a new composition of it using that polyxylazate. I know I'm going to get murdered in the comments because I don't know how to say that, and I probably should figure that out. But it's
Okay.
really fascinating. This stuff goes on, and it is literally between 3 to 5 seconds physically bonding to the paint and needs to be wiped off between 15 and 30 seconds. So it's like, bam, really quick. Whereas other coatings, you can leave it on there before it's ready to come off. I mean, just the amount of understanding behind this can get very, very confusing in general.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of confused just hearing about it, and I've always been confused a bit, but that's kind of why I have a profound appreciation for your work and the people who do decide to nerd out about it, because there are just so many products. I mean, even just going to, for example, Adam's Polishes by myself, I could just look at all their detailing stuff, and I'm like, I don't even know what I need. I don't even know what questions to ask. There's, and that's, that's other topics for videos as well. But like you mentioned, I was curious about this whole process of consumer grade versus accredited. What does that mean, and why have I never even heard that before?
So yeah, it's kind of this. It's kind of strange when you really dig deep into it. Now I'm kind of in the works, in all honesty, to start working with Geon in their certified detailer program, and that's really what it is. So it's you can so say Jordan, you want to ceramic coat your car. You go to I want to buy G Technic coating or a Geon or Adams Polishes coating. Those are the consumer grade ones. Now, they also have a step up above that to have longer durability coatings that are warranted, but also professionally installed. So that's one of the big things. Now, I will say I have shied away from kind of going down that rabbit hole solely based on I really didn't like the durability factor in some of those pro grade coatings. So you physically, Jordan, couldn't go buy this actual coating and install it. I couldn't here unless I was physically accepted into their program to be able to do that. So there's a couple of things that I think it's good that you have kind of these top level coatings, but to me, the durability has always been this weird thing. I really kind of struggle with putting a coating on a car that lasts any longer than 5 years. Why I say that is because a lot of the times what happens is these cars they get driven, hopefully, right? So you're taking it out, you're getting it dirty. You may not have the absolute perfect wash method every time. Somebody may smack a cart against your car in the in the parking lot, or kids rubbing up against, whatever it may be. I kind of find that like 3 to 5 year range, depending on how you use your car, is a good time because the cars need to get repolished, and then we can give it a nice refresh, recoat it, instead of having this like 10 years, in my opinion, kind of snake oil stuff, and have this whole warranty program that is, if you don't bring it in, don't wash it, then your warranty's voided. I just don't feel from a detailer's perspective it's gaining a lot. And I think from the consumer side, it's actually a lot worse in general.
That's interesting. So we get a lot of questions, about the cost of things, especially all the EV videos we do, like when we're doing road trips and stuff. Everyone's like, "Hey, what was the cost of your whole trip?" Because electricity is not free, unlike some of the early marketing and the way Tesla introduced free supercharging for life for certain older cars. That was cool. I'd love to find an old Model S with that. But as far as cost breakdown, obviously there's so many factors that go into it as part of the product, but also even the size of the car, how much product is needed. But as far as the timeline, I mean, is it as simple as a 5 year treatment would be half the price of a 10-year treatment, or is that not how this breakdown works?
Not at all. It's actually really fascinating, and I kind of run through this quite a bit in the and when I'm kind of considering what coatings to use and purchasing them is I'm on some wholesale programs, so I get coatings at a discounted price, not paying full retail what say you would. But there is a huge disparity of that, and thinking about coatings that are single application, so you buy one bottle and apply it once, whereas like G Technic is a 2 layer coating. So you top CSL with XOV4. Now this new stuff I'm using, which is Geonmo's Evo, that's our consumer grade one, is a 2 layer coating with the same actual chemical composition. So again, talking through this, it's very different, and all companies kind of do it very differently. Now their pro level coating that I'm considering using for my business is a single layer, but they only sell it in 30 ml bottles. Now, I'm not allowed to talk about the actual price point that I pay for that coating, but I'll tell you in general, it's about, for a wholesale price, for me to buy a single bottle is about, it's double to almost triple of the other coatings from the consumer grade to pro level.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. It's not as simple as what people might make it out to be, but it's fascinating. It's a fascinating component to car ownership that a lot of people just ignore, but a lot of people obsess over and want to engage it because, I mean, I guess to kind of back up, you said ceramic coating is really to help protect it from elements and kind of make it easier to take care of and wash. Is there like what's your like direct method for washing like your cars that are ceramic coated, and how much like what do you see as the wash method of ceramic coated car versus a non-ceramic coated car to help ease the minds of people who are wondering why they should even do it?
Yeah, so the big thing with coated vehicles, so my personal Tesla Model 3 over here and actually Kyle's Plaid are both coated. Now, these are kind of very different cars because his is black and sits outside 24/7. Mine is white, sits mostly inside. Typically, what I'll do on my personal Model 3 is every time we get a rainstorm, it starts getting a little dusty. I'll do a quick foam down here at the shop and kind of rinse it off, and I can air dry it because I've got, filtered water, I've got heated air to dry it off. Now, when the car gets a little dirtier, doing the full 3 bucket method, having a bucket for wheels, having a clear water rinse bucket, and a full soap bucket is really how I maintain these cars in general. So, what I would say, it's really not different washing them. Still, the challenging thing with a non-coated car is everything's harder to remove. So if you get tree sap on there, if you get bird poop on there, bugs, grime, everything, you start wanting to like scrub these areas because they're just like so deep into the pores of the paint that it really makes it a challenge to get it off. And typically what you're doing when you're scrubbing these things, putting scratches in, putting love marks in. So we're trying to avoid that. And you'll find that they are just like a nightmare to clean. Like when I start these cars coming in, as for doing maintenance details on coated cars, it is just night and day difference how they clean up. Like it's insane.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And as far as the materials that can be coated, I mean, obviously the paint and the wheels you talked about, but you've even been working with some Rivians, right? That have that plastic cladding kind of along the bottom, which is pretty porous. And I've seen, we're seeing so many cars in the industry have this plastic cladding. It apparently makes things look more rugged, which is funny because there's a lot of CUVs that will never see dirt still have this plastic cladding. It seems to fade in the sun a bit. I mean, what's special about taking care of that versus the paint?
Yeah, exactly. So that's one thing I really like about the ceramic coating industry right now is there's not like a one size fits all for everything. So I have different coatings for PPF, then I do paint, then I do wheels, and then for the trim, as we were talking about. Yeah, these Rivians, I have quite a few on the books, have done quite a few of them now. And honestly, immediately from the factory, these things are already looking really dull and kind of just not the greatest, to be honest. You get the paint dialed in, get it polished and coated, and then you look at the trim and you're just like, it doesn't pop. It just looks bad. So what I've been using a lot is ceramic coatings for trim, and I've been using G-Technic Permanent Trim Restore on it, and it is just fantastic. The big thing with that I like about it is it's got a lot of UV protectant. So car sits outside, it's going to stay nice and deep dark black for years to come. I actually made a video over on the Out of Spec detailing channel talking about that specific coating versus more of like a dressing, a quick kind of, again, the same thing, talking wax versus ceramic coating and a dressing for trim versus a full-on ceramic coating. It makes a huge difference on durability, on time you have to, continually maintain. And it's just kind of fascinating when you really dive into it.
I find this super fascinating. I mean, partially because I've just never given it that much attention, and just ignorance is bliss. But then once you start experiencing ceramic coated cars and washing them, it's like, oh, this is way nicer than the scrubbing, the really cringy scrubbing of bugs and weird grime off the cars. I definitely feel that, and even we have so many random rough roads. You might be driving through freshly tarred stuff. There's so much that happens to these cars. But on one hand, it's awesome to see them driven. As much as I love a pristine car because it's a museum piece, I love even more a car that's driven all the time properly and still taken care of. So, yeah,
and that's the cool thing with these coated cars, Jordan. Sorry to cut you off there, but that's a really cool thing is that you can like go beat them up and then give them a nice wash and just kind of reinvigorate everything and make it nice and clean again.
That's perfect. Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks for diving in a bit on this. If there's anything else you want to add before we close out, but this is a good kind of, I think, introduction to ceramic coating, if nothing else. There's obviously so many little niches and facets we can get into, and I think we should at some point. But it's a fascinating component of a very small piece of this giant thing called detailing and taking care of cars.
Yeah, it's just kind of crazy when you really dive deep into it. I would love to do more ceramic coating topics and just kind of, there's so much stuff to talk about in there. I mean, we've only touched the tip of the iceberg, if you will, on it. But I think for this one, if you guys have any questions or videos you'd like to see in the future, some questions as far as ceramic coatings, feel free to leave those in the comments, or send us messages on Twitter, Instagram, whatever it may be. Be very curious to check those out.
Yeah, definitely let us know with your questions, because like you said, we've only scratched the surface. Cringy pun intended. And there's a lot more to get into. So check out Colton, of course, at Out of Spec Detail on Twitter, and of course Out of Spec Detailing, the YouTube channel on which he is running. So, and we're here at the Out of Spec Podcast. We have video and audio formats, of course. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you very soon on another detailing podcast, because we have all of these things to talk about in the midst of everything else we talk about. Cheers, guys.
Definitely.